The school-aged years, so we're talking 5 to 11, are a time of growing independence. But how do food allergies enter the mix as your child starts spending more time away from you at school, sports, extracurriculars, and playdates? Today, we explore how to help your child speak up, stay safe, and feel included as they learn to manage their own food allergies. This is part 4 of our 6-part Food Allergy Ages and Stages series, inspired by the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology's Ages and Stages handouts. If you missed the other episodes, we've already covered early allergen introduction, food allergy basics for newly diagnosed families, and managing food allergies in babies and toddlers, so we're talking 0 to 5. This podcast is made in partnership with the Allergy and Asthma Network. We want to thank Genentech and Aquestive for sponsoring today's episode. While they support the show, all opinions are our own and sponsorship doesn't influence our content or editorial decisions. Any mentions of brands is for informational purposes only and not an endorsement. Now let's get into it. You're listening to The Itch, a podcast exploring all things allergy, asthma, and immunology. We are back with our Ages and Stages series, and we are very excited to have one of our favorite guests, Dr. Dave Stukas. So today we are talking about ages 5 to 11. Last week we talked about ages 0 to 5, and now we're headed to elementary school. So welcome back, Dr. Stukas. We're very excited to have you with us again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and this is going to be a great conversation, one of my favorite topics.
Now, we like to ask our guests on this series, why are we breaking up the ages? So we did 0 to 5, and now we're doing 5 to 11. Why do you think that it's important for us to talk about food allergies in different age chunks?
This is exactly why I love being a pediatrician, because you can take the exact same condition, whether it's food allergy, asthma, whatever it may be, and depending upon the age of the child that has that condition, the approach towards management can be very different. And when we break it up in different ages, of course, in the very young age group, it's going to be mostly on parents and caregivers to take control of everything. But what we're going to talk about today is the really fun age group, because it's a wide range. And now we're talking about 5 to 11-year-olds. They have different stages of development. Their cognitive abilities are very different. Their language acquisition, their personalities, and this is when they're becoming really the person that they're going to be. This is a great age to really start getting them more involved in their own management and understanding what their food allergies entail.
So 5 to 11 is quite broad, which we mentioned, and I'm not sure if there's a blanket thing that we need to make sure that these kids need to know about having food allergies, or whether there is nuance between 5 and 8 and 11. So what, if you have to break it down, or if you can blanket it, what is the most important thing that these kids should know about living with food allergies?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what age they are or where they are within this range, I think every child needs to know what they're allergic to, obviously. It may not seem so obvious because sometimes parents actually try to protect their children. And I think they're helping them by not making them part of the conversation. But can they tell other adults, especially, what are they allergic to? Depending upon where they are in regards to their developmental stage, can they start sort of speaking up for themselves, especially if they're at play dates or parties, or, even ordering food at a restaurant? Are they able to communicate, this is what I'm allergic to? As they start to read and become more comfortable with that, are they practicing reading labels and identifying their allergen and avoiding things that aren't safe for them to eat? So I think those are the basics that we really need to strive for, regardless of what age they are.
Yeah, it is such a broad range that we're talking about today. A 5-year-old is just learning how to read, right? An 11-year-old is an experienced reader. So they're really going to be able to get into those food labels, read them, and make sure that they're staying safe. But the important thing is really to start early, right? And to make sure that they're familiar with what a food label is, and that every single time they're about to eat something, that they need to check that food label. So modeling that behavior early on is so important. And that's what we see in that younger age group, is starting early, modeling. They're like little shadows of everyone that's taking care of them. And they want to do the right thing. They want to do what you're doing. They want to ask questions. My 5-year-old is just question boy. He's like, why? And it's really hard to answer those questions sometimes. But I think that that's what we really need to be doing in this age group.
I was this kind of kid too. And Dr. G says it still, because I'm always like, why? But when kids are asking all of these questions, how much information can we feed them? So for instance, why do I get hives? Why does my stomach hurt? When they ask about their symptoms, how much information can we feed them without creating any fear, but just creating knowledge so that they feel more secure in their food allergies?
Yeah, it can be a fine line. Fear it's an artificial construct, right? So it's all about how you frame things. I mean, kids are really smart. They absorb this stuff, just like Payel was saying. So regardless of their age, just saying, we don't know why you have an allergy to this food, but we do know that you're allergic to it, and we have ways to protect you. If you were to eat this food, the allergy cells inside your body would become activated, and they could release things that could make you sick. And one of those things is something called histamine, which causes you to itch and get hives and can have swelling and things like that. This really is only going to happen if you're going to eat that food. So we want to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent that from happening. But the good news is, if you do accidentally eat it and your body starts to feel sick, we have a medicine that's going to make you feel better right away. And that's when we talk about why epinephrine is really important to have available at all times as well. So
And if you are feeding them information, say they've only experienced a reaction with like hives and swelling, or they don't remember what an allergic reaction was like because it happened when they were 2 and now they're 7, and so that memory is not even there anymore. How do parents communicate all of the symptoms that could potentially happen when they're having an allergic reaction for them to look out for, and then for them to tell an adult that something's going on?
yeah, that's almost impossible to do. So if we take it from a child's viewpoint, right? So their whole world's going on around them. All they care about is, when do I get to play with my friends or play video games or have fun and things like that. So if you're really trying to capture their attention, you can't give a 30-minute lecture. It really has to be snippets of information repeated over time and reinforced, and take advantage of opportune times. So if you're going grocery shopping together, you can practice pulling the labels off the shelves and reading them. Does this seem like it's safe for you? And at that moment, say something like, well, if we accidentally got something that wasn't safe, what do you think it would feel like in your body? And see what they say. Meet them where they are. And they may have no idea. Like you said, they're not going to remember oftentimes their prior reaction. So then we can tell them, well, it's going to happen pretty soon after eating, and you may feel really itchy. Your stomach may start to be really upset. But the important thing is to recognize that if your body feels very different and you just ate something, that may be a sign that you're having an allergic reaction. And then just reinforcing it over and over and over again in different situations. I think that's probably the best way to approach it.
Yeah. And I think the other message that we need to give them when we're talking about that is just that if they do feel funny, the first thing that they need to do is tell somebody. And that's the next step. So, number one, it's recognizing that I ate something and my body feels funny. And I think in general, we tell kids that, right? We tell our kids, like, if you're not feeling good, you have to tell me. And so, this is just another situation where we want them to understand that if they eat something and their body doesn't feel right and they don't know what's going on, they need to tell an adult so that an adult can look at them and help them feel better and make sure that they aren't having that allergic reaction that we're worried about. So I think that's one of the other things that we can start talking about really early. And especially in a 5-year-old, they already understand their body. They already are very verbal. And that's the difference between the last episode and this episode. Really, these kids are able to tell us what's going on and how they're feeling, but we just want to make sure that they know what they need to do if they're not feeling good.
Yeah, and if I could just add on, it's interesting because although they have the language, sometimes they don't always have the right words, right? So that's interesting with 5, 6, 7-year-olds. Sometimes they say, my mouth feels salty, or I feel tingly, or, they're not going to often say, I feel itchy, because they may not know what that means. So just recognizing, like you said, my body feels different, and to let somebody know, that's the most important part.
And how much do you reinforce the importance of epinephrine? And does it change with a 5-year-old and a 8-year-old and an 11-year-old?
Yeah, this is another one of those where we really don't want to promote fear. We want to promote having it with you. So that's a learning opportunity that we can model for all of our children, regardless of the age. So every time you're leaving the house, okay, do you have your epinephrine with you? Where is it? All right, that's a good job. Why do we want to have it with us? Just in case we eat something and it makes us sick. Very good. All right, let's go. That's all it takes. And just doing that over and over again. And then the more consistent you are with that, the better you're going to be at having that with you. As kids get older and they become more independent, start doing more activities, then it's just asking them, reminding them, okay, on your way out the door, you have your water bottle? Yep, I got my water bottle. Okay, whatever, mom and dad. Okay, do you have your epinephrine? Yeah, I have it. Can you just show me that you have it? And then sometimes you may realize they don't actually have it in their bag. So that's a teachable moment. It's like, okay, let's just pause for a second, make sure you have it with you just in case. So it's just reinforcing it over time, and really every time that you're leaving the home, or especially if you're going out to a restaurant or something like that.
And the other thing that we had talked about was just the use of trainers. Trainers are super important when you're training your family members and training caregivers. But when do you introduce the concept of trainers, or just even showing them how the epinephrine device works? How do you approach that, Dave?
Yeah, when we think about self-administration, we're really not even talking about that till kids are 10 or 11 years old for the most part. And every child's different. Some aren't ready when they're 18 to self-administer. Some are ready when they're 9. So it really is an individual, where are they in their development? Can they demonstrate it? But that's where they have to practice. So they have to, show us that they can actually do this the right way. I think in the office setting, when we see patients, it's very easy. It's a teachable moment. So we practice, we say, okay, let's say you're in this situation, you eat something, your body feels this way. Would you use your epinephrine? Yes, I would. Okay, show me how you use it. And then every single time they fumble through it, there's a misstep. And that's okay. And we say, listen, this is a very safe environment. There's no pressure here. This is a practice. Here's the one thing that we didn't do. But then for parents, it's intermittent throughout the year. It's not like something you need to do every day. It also is a fine line. We don't want them to think it's a toy, but we also don't want them to fear it either. So the more that they can actually hold it and see what it actually feels like, I think the better off it is if we ever have to use that in real life. But then, of course, put it in a safe place. We don't want them lying around where they can reach them and use them when they're not necessary. One of the things I reinforce, I always say, this is a medicine. It's very safe. It's going to make you feel better a lot faster than if we didn't use it. So if you ever think you need to use it, it's not going to hurt you and it's going to make you feel better a lot faster. So, make sure you let somebody know, and this is something we want to do because it's just going to work really, really well.
So that's the messaging that parents should say to their kids. But what do you feel like you have to tell parents when they start talking to their kids? Because I think that there's a lot of fear that the parents have themselves, that even if they're trying to be as cool as a cucumber, they might transfer that fear onto their kid when they're talking about the food allergies, since they were the ones who witnessed the allergic reaction. And that's like a parent's worst nightmare, right? So how do we kind of cool them down when they're trying to be cool for their kid?
I mean, I'm a part-time psychologist. So this is what we do, right? So we're diagnosing and managing children, but as pediatric allergists, we're also helping parents. And I acknowledge that. I tell them, I say, listen, you're never going to forget watching them have that allergic reaction. And I tell them, this is a form of PTSD, if not full-blown PTSD. And I know that that's the last thing you ever want to witness again. But now that we know what they're allergic to, now that we've discussed management, now that we've discussed risk, we've discussed precautions, we're hopeful that's not going to occur again. If it does, you're so much better prepared now to handle it. You're going to do great. So we just want to address that real fear that they're living with and then reinforce to them. And then also there are times when I have to say to parents, I say, listen, I see right now in the room, you are extremely anxious. You're making me anxious. If your child's witnessing that on a regular basis, that's going to make them anxious. And we really want to promote a positive approach to this. So if there's a path where I can help you with this, I think it's going to help your overall family. And it's a normal part of having this diagnosis. And that's the reason why at our center, we have 2 psychologists on staff. So just normalize it as much as possible. But you also have to address it, because if we can't help the parents, sometimes we can't help the child either.
Yeah, if that fear starts early for a child, then it's something that's really hard to unravel. And I know we've all had cases like that where they are that 10 to 11-year-old that has totally become socially isolated, has so much fear and anxiety around eating, around other individuals other than their parents. And so I think watching out for early signs of that in your child is really important. And those can be things like, again, social isolation, not wanting to do things unless certain people are around, unless parents are around, not feeling comfortable going out to eat, those kind of things. We need to address those early on. And if those are becoming an issue, seeing a therapist as a family might be a good idea to address that early on so that it doesn't continue to become a bigger and bigger issue as time moves on.
Are there other signs that parents can look out for to see if their children are manifesting some sort of fear about food allergies in a different way? I am asking because I know a lot of adults who have OCD and they have food allergies, and sometimes they like to say that's probably because that was my coping mechanism as a child. So I'm just curious if there's something that parents can watch out for now and address early.
This is an important topic because this can happen in children with food allergies. So we want to just monitor. So one, if they stop eating foods that they were previously eating without any concerns, that's a huge red flag. So there's a reason for that. Maybe they ate something one time and their body felt a little different and they thought it was a reaction. Maybe they heard something or were told something and they're scared for whatever reason. So if they stop eating things that they were eating. Now you can have picky eating behaviors and certain taste preferences, but it should prompt the conversation. Why do you no longer eat this? Do you think it's going to make you sick? Bring it up with your allergist. that sort of thing. Children were reluctant to go to grandma and grandpa's. Sometimes it was because they were accidentally exposed to what they were allergic to, or sometimes something else happened and they didn't trust any other caregiver other than their own parents. So just kind of monitoring their behavior. It's very similar to signs of bullying in children. So if they start to withdraw, if they become more nervous, if they start to manifest with chronic abdominal pain or headaches, those are two of the most common symptoms that kids have when they're having increased stress or anxiety. And that can all kind of relate to one another.
Kortney, also OCD behaviors like lots of cleaning and things like that you alluded to would also be a red flag. If the kid all of a sudden won't eat until they've cleaned everything around them and are doing behaviors that a 5-year-old or 6-year-old normally wouldn't do, we want to definitely check those out and make sure that they're not feeling overly anxious about their diagnosis.
This is part of the counseling that I offer at every follow-up visits. This is why follow-up visits are so important, even if you've had a food allergy for years. One is our treatment and approaches have changed dramatically, but number two, we just need to see how things are going. So I tell every family, if you notice that there's a change in your child's behavior, or you no longer go out to eat, or they're unwilling to travel, please let me know. Reach out to me. And yeah, once or twice a year, they do. Like, oh, Dr. Stukas, I remember we talked about this. Here's what I've been noticing. And we can get them support and get them the help that they need.
Great, thank you. I think that's really important because I know I am battling things that I definitely did not tell my parents now as an adult. And I feel like if we can nip it in the bud, let's do that. I grew up in the 90s with food allergies, so they just threw me into the wild and I learned how to cope in weird ways. That makes me think really though, like when I was a kid, my parents honestly just let me play in the forest all day and had no idea what I was up to. They had no idea we were like swimming and getting French fries. And nowadays, I feel like we're creating a much more protective environment for food allergy kids. And that brings up the big question, do you have an allergen-free home or not? How do you address that? We talked about it in our 0 to 5, just because kids are like touching everything and putting their hands in their mouth. So maybe that's a time for you to keep allergens out of the house. What do you think about it, Dr. Stukas?
Yeah, I think it's a preference for each family. So it's my job to really discuss from a medical standpoint, the risk comes from them eating the food. If it's an environment where they're getting into things and intentionally eating what they're allergic to, which is pretty unusual for a 5 to 11-year-old, typically they're more afraid than anything to ever try something that could have their allergen. Very different than a 0 to 5-year-old who explore their environments with their mouths on purpose. That's one thing. So we want to say, look, if you want to have this in your home, you can easily do that. And one, it's modeling and showing your child who's 5 to 11, this is safe. It's okay to be around other people eating what you're allergic to. It's not going to make you sick. And then it just reinforces, okay, for everybody who does eat that, let's confine that to the dinner table or wherever you have your meals. Let's not eat it on the couch and get crumbs on the floor and stuff like that. Let's make them feel comfortable. And then afterwards, make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. And then whatever utensils or silverware or things that you use to prepare it, make sure you wash that with dish soap or run it through the dishwasher. It's an important thing to kind of model that this is the world we live in. You're going to go to restaurants, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to people's houses where your allergen is present, and it's okay for you to be there as long as you don't eat it.
Yeah, and also just modeling the behavior of navigating a kitchen. I've heard that college students will move into their first dorm room or a situation where they're sharing a kitchen and they're not really understanding that they need to be aware at all times because all of a sudden it's their home environment. And if it's been sheltered too much, then they don't know that home environment, they still need to be reading labels and they still need to be watching out for their allergen. And I think starting that habit early on also helps, that no matter where you are, you want to make sure that you're reading labels and making sure that whatever you're eating is safe for you. So I think creating that learning environment is super important, and not totally protecting all the time is helpful.
Can I add on to that? Because I love the way that you said learning environment. With food allergy in particular, there's always the what if questions. What if this? What if that? And the best way to answer those is to live the experience. So if we want to demonstrate to somebody, for a child who's 5 to 11, if they live in a house where other people are eating what they're allergic to and they're not experiencing reactions or getting sick, they're learning that it's safe for them to be near it. Whereas if they're protected from that and then they finally get put into an environment, it can be very uncomfortable, especially if they're at a party or a friend's house or something, and then that can ruin the whole experience for them. So for those families that choose to have these in their home, I think it's a great way to demonstrate that it's safe.
This is like a weird thing, but also showing kids what their allergens look like. Because I know so many people who are like, I'm allergic to tree nuts, and they literally have no idea what like a walnut looks like. So I think that's also important, showing what the allergen looks like in its different forms as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think that absolutely. And then also the different products, because now, oh my gosh, we have all these different like tree nut butters. We have powders, there's trail mix, there's all these other things. So it goes back to just modeling when you're at the grocery store, just how do you know if it's something safe? Or when you're inside the home, how do you read labels and show that? But I love that idea of actually showing them this is what it looks like, by the way.
Yeah, and I think we do this anyway with kids, but hand washing is another habit that kids need to get used to in general, but like definitely with food allergies, just making sure that if they've been playing with toys that other kids have been playing with in the park, all that kind of stuff, that before they eat, they have to wash their hands. That's a part of what we do anyways, but I think with a food allergy kid, we want to be extra sure that they're doing those things.
So we talked about the house as a protective environment, and I know that there is a big debatable question about the school environment, and that is the food allergy table. Dr. Stokas, can you talk to us about the food allergy table?
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't think it should be debatable. I think that we want to encourage kids to sit with their peers. The last thing you want to do is sit them by themselves on the other side of the cafeteria in social isolation, eating lunch by themselves every day, year after year. If we understand risk and knowing that you really, for the vast majority of people, you have to eat what you're allergic to cause a reaction, not just sitting near somebody. There's a very small minority of children who may react through cross contact or trace amounts, things like that. But if we just reinforce, don't share food. I tell kids, depending upon their age, this comes up a lot. If it's like a 9 or 10-year-old, especially a boy, I say, listen, if you're worried about having a reaction in the cafeteria, you're literally going to have to look at your friend who's eating peanut butter and jelly, punch them in the face, steal their sandwich and shove it in your mouth. That's what's going to cause a reaction. And they kind of laugh and they get a little uncomfortable. I say, do you think you're ever going to do that? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, there you go. So good hand washing before and after, no sharing food. Now there's nuance here, right? So if there are 300 children and your child with allergies is sitting in the middle of the cafeteria, maybe not ideal. Can they sit at the regular table, but maybe in the same spot every day or on the end? So the adults that know they have food allergies know where they're sitting. That's a different story. And that can make people a little more comfortable as well. But it goes back to what we talked about of just, you have to live these experiences and get more comfortable with it. So that typically is not the source of kids having reactions, especially if they have their own safe food and they're not sharing with others. I think it's fine to sit amongst their peers.
We learned so much through experimenting, right? So as a community, we thought that that would be a good idea. And then we quickly learned that that wasn't a good idea to put kids in isolation and that it created a lot of sadness really among food allergy children and depression. And so I think that it's important to realize that and to help parents understand that too. When we're going to school and when we're starting daycare, what are the things that we need to ensure that the daycare staff, the school staff, understand and that everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, communication is the key. So depending upon the age of the child, and the 5-year-old, 6-year-old, the first time they go to kindergarten is always a big milestone for a lot of families of, that's when they're really leaving for a full day, every day of the week, that sort of thing. So communicate before the school year starts. Don't wait until the first day of school, or talk to the child's teacher or teachers and also the school nurse if they have one. This is where written communication is extremely important. So this is where the food allergy and anaphylaxis treatment plan comes into play. Here's what my child's allergic to. Here are the symptoms. Here's the medication, and make sure you give them the medication that they need in case they have an allergic reaction, along with instructions for what to do, when to call the family, that sort of thing. It's worthwhile having the conversation. I always like to have families ask, ask the teacher, have you had children in your class that have these allergies in the past? What's been your experience? Have you had any issues with it? Did you notice art was a problem because sometimes they use peanut butter as the glue for birdhouses, or, what have you experienced? And that alone, just that conversation can oftentimes put families at ease. Unfortunately, food allergies have been on the rise for the last 20 years. So it's unlikely you're going to find a classroom in America, at least, where they've gone through without having any students who have had food allergies in the past. So communicating, having that conversation, making sure they have the written action plan, and making sure their medications are available. Those are important things every single school year, especially as they're switching teachers in school years. And it's a very different conversation than if you walk in and you say, listen, my child has 8 food allergies. If they're anywhere near it, they could die. If anything happens to them, I'm going to sue you. That's not the conversation we want to have. We're trusting these folks with our children. They're going to spend a lot of time in these environments. By law in the United States, food allergies are considered a disability, so they are entitled to have 504 plans, and in some cases written IEPs. Is it necessary for most children? Not usually, but if you find yourself in a situation where the school really isn't understanding or meeting your child's needs, that you have that legally available to you. And then one last thing is, I always recommend to families, follow up with the teacher 2 to 3 weeks into the school year. Hey, just reaching out. Any questions? questions. Have you encountered any situations that made you uncomfortable or you weren't quite sure if it was safe for my child? I just want you to know that I'm here to answer any questions if you have them as well. So it's a dialogue, it's a conversation, and it should evolve over time.
But also, I think for me, if I had a food allergy child, I would also want the teachers to show me that they know how to use the epinephrine device. I would want to know that they truly understand. And I would probably take my trainer in. You want to make sure that everyone understands that this is what it looks like, this is how you use it. And that's really where the trainer comes in. Most schools, most teachers, staff, they all want to keep their kids safe. And if you do it in a really nice way, as Dave mentioned, then they'll totally be on board. And if you just say, do you mind if I show you exactly how to use it? And do you mind if you just show me that you can do it? Because I'm really putting a lot of trust in you. And if something were to happen, I don't want you to be worried. And I don't want to be scared.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, you could even volunteer. Would it be okay if I came in one day and just talked to the class and showed everybody and talked about their allergy, or find out what the plan is for parties? Like, is it food free? Do they allow food? Make sure that your child's not excluded. So, hey, can I bring in allergen safe snacks if you give me a week's notice for the next party or something like that? So you can really become great partners with the teacher as well.
We had a guest on who talked about 504 plans, and she said it's better to attract flies with honey than with hot sauce. So keeping that in mind is like, if we come in being really nice, then hopefully we're going to get niceness back. But if we come in being like on fire and really aggressive, then that's what people are going to meet us with. So like how you're trying to meet your kid where they are with food allergies, the same thing goes with school staff, right? Now, they're with your kid all year round, or 10 months of the year. What about parties and sleepovers and these kinds of things where your kid's just going there for a couple of hours? This person is not trained with an epinephrine auto injector or nasal spray. How do parents not have the knee-jerk response of going, oh, let's just skip that one? But how do they work towards themselves building confidence and then giving their kids the tools to properly go to a party?
Yeah, it's all the principles we've discussed. So communicate ahead of time. So it's not when you're dropping your child off, is that should not be the first time you say, hi, my child has these food allergies. If they eat it, they could have anaphylactic shock. Here's their medication. If they need to use it, give me a call. Thanks. Have a good night. Bye. That's not an effective way to do that. So identifying whose house are they going to ahead of time, reaching out to them. Hey, I just want to thank you so much for hosting. Is there anything that I can do? By the way, my child has allergies to X, Y, and Z. Are you familiar with anybody who has food allergies? See what they say. Here's the deal. We just need to make sure they don't eat it. So do you have any idea what you're going to serve that night? Okay. I don't think that's probably going to be very safe for my child. If it's okay, I'm going to send them with their own safe food. And all I ask for you is just make sure that there's no sharing going on. They're very good. They're well versed in doing this. So we just want to make sure. By the way, they have a medicine called epinephrine. Have you ever seen this? Have you ever used it? If it's okay with you, I'll bring a training device with me when I drop them off. I'll just show you how it goes. If you have any questions, please let me know. But they're going to have it with them as well. And they know that if they feel sick, they're going to let you know right away, in which case you can contact me. So that's a very easy kind of conversation. And again, in today's day and age, most people are going to be familiar with food allergies at the very least. So yeah, it's just understanding what the situation is going to bring ahead of time and making sure you're prepared.
Amazing. I think that's a great way to end it off.
I love how you lead with questions. I think that really loops people into the conversation and also gives them some onus. That's a really beautiful way of talking about food allergies.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize I was doing that, but I appreciate that.
But that's what years of experience is like, learning how to really get people to understand and empathize with you, right? Is like to bring them into the conversation. So with that, I feel like this has been a really informative episode for parents and also for me as an adult. I'm learning something new. So what I would love to do is just know your top tip for a parent or caregiver of a 5 to 11-year-old. We can start with you, Dr. Stukas.
Have a conversation. Talk to them. Ask how they're feeling about it. How does it feel to be allergic to this? Is there anything that you miss? You'll learn a whole lot. Sometimes the best times for those conversations are in the car ride home from activities or from school. Don't try to plan for the 30-minute detailed in-depth, tell me about your life, because that ain't going to happen with most of our kids. So take the moments when you can get them. And sometimes 2 minutes in the car, it can give you a wealth of information and lead to the next great conversation as well.
Yeah, that was great. My tip is really that kids are sponges, especially these early years, and we want to set good habits early on. Definitely want to watch for those signs that the food allergy is becoming more of an anxiety-provoking or fear-provoking diagnosis for them, and kind of nip that in the bud as early as we can, because really these are the foundational years. And we want to make sure that we set the stage for them to be happy, ready to live life to the fullest, individuals, even with a food allergy, it's absolutely possible. People travel all over the world. They do everything with their food allergies, and it's even easier now than it ever was. So I think that that's the biggest message, is these are really important critical years and setting a good example.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like parents hopefully have gotten something good out of this. And I know that we are going to be moving into middle and high school next episode. So get prepared for puberty years. I feel like that's probably a whole new can of worms. So check that out. It's coming to you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember that all information you hear today is for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have a second, help spread the word by rating our podcast and sharing with your friends and family who might also be interested in learning more about allergies, asthma, and immunology. You can always stay up to date by checking out our Instagram, The Itch Podcast, where you can leave questions you are itching to know, or check out our website, which is www.itchpodcast.com, which contains more information about the subjects we covered in today's episode and every episode. Until next time, have a fabulous week.